So we are going to focus on subqueries today. And I know a couple of people have already kind of talked about some subqueries and how they're, a little bit complex, especially the exercises. So I thought we could do just a lot kind of in that around the curriculum this week, which is perfect. I was kind of planning on that anyways, and it'll just work perfect. So just to start off, I kind of want to recap, and I kind of put this in the announcements, and we'll talk about all these additionally, but just in case you didn't catch the announcement, basically there's a few different types of subqueries. There's a scalar subquery, which returns a single value. So basically, just like a function would return like a single value if it was just like a normal int function or something. That's what a scalar value does. So it returns one column and one row. So in other words, a single value. Then there's a correlated subquery, which a correlated subquery basically means that it's connected to the outer query, meaning that we use a piece of the outer query. And what we mean by the outer query is not the subquery. And we use that, a part of that inside. So they're connected. You can't run it by itself. And then there's so like a good example of this is this one. If we tried to run this subquery, because most times subqueries, you can kind of just run them by themselves. But this one says, there's an unknown column, the c.customer ID doesn't work because this c.customer ID is actually pulling from here, which is outside of it. So we can kind of connect the subqueries, which is really handy if you want to filter like, oh, I only want to pull this subquery for like the row on the outside that's kind of being evaluated at the time. So that's correlated subquery. And then lastly is the multi-column subquery, which returns basically a table. And it can be used for a lot of different things, but the most common one is actually it gets used as a virtual table, which is really handy, and we've seen those before. So what I thought we'd do is we just kind of go through some of the exercises, and we can just kind of do a few of the exercises and kind of walk through a couple of them together, make sure we're all kind of, I guess, on the same page. So it says construct a query against the film table that uses a filter condition with a non-correlated subquery against the category table to find all action films. And so it kind of gives you like a little bit of a hint here. So I'm actually going to just copy this, and we'll just put it in a note here. In fact, let's just make a new file, make a little comment here. Ooh, and that is not wrapping. So let's just do that. There we go. So construct a query against the film table, okay, that uses a filter condition with a non-correlated subquery. So first things first is we want to query against the film table from film. And it uses a filter condition, so where, with a non-correlated subquery. So we're going to put that there. So this is kind of like our basis thing. And just to start off, I kind of want to see what's in film to get started. So we're going to select everything from film, and let's take a look here. So we have our title, description, release year, language ID, rental duration, a couple different things, but we really don't have anything that has like a category, if you notice. And that's because we have this table called film category. Because technically a film can be in multiple categories. So film category. So a film can be in multiple categories. So what we need to do is find all the action films based on this information, but we kind of need to tie it together. So what we're going to do is because we're using a non-correlated subquery, basically what we want to do is make it so we can find, so we're going to say where film ID is in, and then this is where we're going to write our subquery. And our subquery, whenever I write, especially non-correlated subqueries are easy because we can build them first before we even have to kind of embed them inside of our main query. So what we're looking for is we're looking for all of the action films. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say, and yeah, we could do this with joins, but that's kind of outside the point. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say select everything from film category. And we're going to left interjoin this, interjoin with category. And we're going to do that. I guess we better put our aliases here, film category. We're going to do that on where the category ID is equal to the category ID, obviously. Make sure our joins match on our foreign keys there. And we want it where the category name is equal to action. So I can run this and get a list of all of our, this is kind of what we're looking for. Now, right now, if we were to use this as a subquery, this returns a table, which we don't want because, well, if we're filtering, we want film ID to be in a list, it can't check a whole table. So all we have to do is just, instead of selecting the whole table, we just select the list of film IDs. And so now what we can do is we can just take our subquery, and because it's non-correlated, we could run it, see the result, and we're just going to put it right in here. And so what I like to do is kind of put it in its own little line here and just kind of indent it one. So that way it's kind of easy to see the query there. And we're doing it so film ID is in this list because basically this is just returning a list. So here is all of our action movies. So the other way to get to that would have just been to do, 3 joins, go from film to film category to category and join those. But, like I said, not part of the exercise. And later we'll actually, after we get through these exercises, I want to go over some cases where joins won't work. You have to use a subquery. But does anyone have any questions about this one, non-correlated subquery here? All right. So then question 2 takes this a next step. So basically question 2 says rework the exercise that we just did, but this time we're going to use a correlated subquery. And the correlated subquery is going to be a little bit different. I'm actually glad they kind of have this way, and that's why I kind of wanted to go through these, because we get to really see the difference between correlated and non-correlated, which can be confusing at times. So we are just going to pop that there. All right, and since we're reworking it, basically I'm just going to take this here and I'm just going to put it down here. And so now we want to use a correlated subquery. And well, what's the difference? Well, we could run our subquery by itself before. If you remember, we kind of built it independently, which means that it's not correlated. We can run this as much as we want. It's not correlated. So what we're going to do now is we're going to correlate this subquery. So what we're going to do is we're just going to change this up a little bit. And so we're going to say, we're going to just move our join to the outside. So we're going to say interjoin film category, call FC, and we're going to delete this because we'll just start from scratch here. Now this one, we have to kind of write it in here because we can't test it independently, because then it would be non-correlated and not answer the question. So because we have our join out here, which we need to finish, film ID is equal to fc.film ID. Now that we have our join out here, now we're connected to the film and the film category. So what we're going to do is we're just going to change this to where category ID is in. And technically in this case, we don't even have to say in, we can just say equal. And at this point we could say, you know, we could write our thing, but let's see, it needs to be correlated. So let's think about this for just a minute. Because at this point we would say select, you know, category ID from category where it's equal to name or equal to action. So to correlate this, we have to kind of do a little bit something trickier. So let's see where category ID. So we can do this. So we can just add a where clause. So we will just say where. Can we do this without having to do the join? Try like this, where using a correlated subquery against the category and film category. Okay, so we need to using a correlated. Okay, so yeah, let's take out our join here. So we're making this too easy. I'm a big fan of joins, and so to me this is a little backwards thinking because we're trying to work through the joins. So if we want to check, so let's say we want the category ID to be in, we need to correlate this. So we're gonna, let's put this back in and just start here. We really just need to add correlation to this. So this will get our films. So back to where we were here. The film ID is in this list, but we want to correlate this. So what we do is we say where c.name is equal to action. And we can make that pretty easy and get the same results. So this fulfills a requirement. It's not as great as I thought it would be, just because like technically we don't need this, but this will make it correlated. So this line, because we're connecting this f.film ID, it's pulling from the outside. Basically, we just correlate that, which is nice because it's an additional check, but either way, because we're checking for film ID here, either way works, but that will satisfy that that one. So there's that one. All right, and we might skip around here a little bit. Join the following query to a subquery against the film actor table to show the level of each actor. This is a good one. So let's go ahead and do this one. All right. So this is join the following query to a subquery. Let's get our text here so we can see what we're supposed to do. All right, so we've got this one here for us that's kind of already kind of set. And what we need to do is we need to join this to a subquery. So we select that, and then we're going to say join. And really the easiest way is to go like this. Select everything from, and we are going to do film actor, FA, and we are going to left join against this thing. Somewhere our text is weird. Where are we missing it? There it is. All right. And we're going to call this one R for roles, or let's call it RL for role level or something like that. So basically this one has a select list for us already, and let's just run this by itself to kind of see what happens. So basically this is like as if we this one's a virtual table. So multi-column table or subquery. And basically what it is we're building out basically like rules. So if you're a new, like, let's say I've been in 18 movies. Well, to be a Hollywood star, you need to have a minimum of 30 roles. To be a prolific actor, you need to have a minimum of 20. So because I only have 18, I would be bucketed into the newcomer category. But let's say, someone else has, 31, they would have been a Hollywood star by one. Or let's say someone just hit 20, they would just have been upgraded to the role of prolific actor. So that's kind of what that's doing. And again, non-correlated because we can run it externally from the parent query. So let's go ahead and join this up. So we're going to say on, and we're going to say, so this is film actor. So we want it where the count, actually, let's do this. Cross join, because we're kind of doing this on the fly here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cross join this table with the other one. And what that's going to do is it's going to basically take all of the film actor records, which is every film an actor's been in. So select everything from film actor, and it's going to multiply it by every possible combination. So let's just run this, and we can actually see, actor ID 1 for film ID 1. Every actor ID and film ID combo is going to be duplicated 3 times, one for each role. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually kind of lump this up just to basically get it to where we can pull all this in, because what we really need to do is we need to sum the number of films that this actor has been in, so that way we can get something to match on. And that's kind of the ask here, is we want to get our subquery. So if I were to say our actor ID, because we want to know how many movies for each actor. So we get our actor, and then we get the count of film ID from film actor. But we need to group by actor ID. If you remember from last week, we want to make sure we have that in there. And I'm going to call this as total roles to kind of match the naming convention here that they're using. So now what we have is we have this query that will pull the actor and the total number of roles that they've been in. And so this is actually our subquery here. And what we're going to do is we are going to join it up here. And now we don't need a cross join. So we are going to just do a left join here. And instead of taking from film actor, we are going to do a subquery like it says. And we're going to call this AR for actor roles. We left join that now. So now that we left join it, we need to have an on clause. And this is where we can say, okay, we want, this to match. And really we could do it both ways. We could keep it as a cross join. Let's actually do that first. So let's cross join this back up again. And we'll see this again. So here's actor 1. And now, his record is duplicated 3 times with 19 total roles. But what this allows us to do is it lets us see where they match up. Because we have every possible combination, we know exactly where to filter it, because we want, how we know which one is accurate is we want where the total roles is greater than or equal, basically is between these two numbers. So, is 19 between 1 and 19 inclusive, of course? The answer is yes. So actor number 1 is a newcomer. Actor number 2, 25, is got 25 roles under his belt. So he's greater than a newcomer, and he's right in the middle of prolific actor, and so on and so forth. So let's kind of build that in. So we kind of have every possible combination. Now we just want to filter out the weeds. And so we say where the AR.total roles is between RL.min roles, RL.max roles. And what did I do wrong here? Oh, there we go. And now that we kind of have that logic built in to filter out all of our duplicates that are trash, now we're left with just our actors and their level. It's pretty cool. And then from here, if we really wanted to, we could then say left join against actor A on AR.actor ID is equal to A.actor ID. And then what we could do is not only get just the actor, but we can get the actor name. So we could, just for the sake of showing, without making this, actually, let's make it pretty. A.actor ID. Let's do A.first name, A.last name, AR.total roles, and AL.level, and what did I call that? RL, not AL. There we go. So to clean that up just a little bit if we wanted to, now we just have the actor ID, first name, the last name, their total number of roles, and what level they're at. Any questions on this one? We took it one step further than technically what we need to for the exercise, but just to show you kind of how we can use these, especially out of all the subqueries I use, these are probably the most common just because they're really, really handy. All right. Let's see. Has anyone been through the exercise and where they want to see another one? Don't necessarily want to do them all, but if there's one particularly tricky one, we can cover that. Or if you want, we can kind of go over a couple more use cases. And what I wanted to do is kind of cover subqueries as it pertains to how you can use it to how you can leverage them to help you while you're basically working on your final project. Anyone got an exercise that's a little bit more difficult?
I just am kind of struggling with all of these. I'm struggling with the logic as you step through each of the piece.
Got it.
But
so like the subqueries as whole, like kind of how to like use them.
Like for me, they make sense when I watch you do it, and they make sense when I read the material, but coming up with my own is really hard.
Okay, yeah, let me go through a couple, because what's kind of hard about these for me anyways is, especially knowing joins, these we don't necessarily, this one we would need, but some of these exercises, like it's kind of like a long scenic route to get to the same result as what we could just get to with a join. So let me do a couple that might make a little bit more sense. And I think will kind of help, because, you know, someone in Teams, and apologies, I can't remember who asked, but they kind of asked for some more examples. So I kind of, ever since then, I've been like thinking about it. That's what I was trying to like think about, like, okay, how can I get data more up to date? Because then it would just be more real, which, apologies, I didn't get done in time, but we can make it work. And I like dealing with business and stuff a lot. So, and to me, that's subqueries. I mean, we can use them for a lot of different things, but to me, like, they're the times when you need them because there's no other way, are probably the easiest way to kind of learn them, because A, you're forced to, and B, because they make sense. So kind of the scenario I was thinking through my head that's really common in the kind of reporting I do. So this is kind of a hurdle that I've struggled with, because a lot of BI platforms don't support really like custom queries. Like you have to kind of like go out of your way to build an additional data set for this kind of stuff, which isn't fun. But one of the problems that I come across is one of the best ways I like to kind of view business and analyze, the direction businesses are heading and trends, is to kind of look at a very segmented view. So what I like to see is like a last 12 months. So basically the last year. I like to look at the last 6 months. And I like to look at the last 3 months. And then to break it down even further, the last 1 month. And then you guys are going to laugh, but I really like to look at like the last 6 weeks. And I guess let's break this out, because I kind of do two kind of reports. I like to look at things monthly, and then if I want more granular, weekly. So I like to kind of split it out like this. So we have monthly, which is our, and I think I like to say, let's do last 12 weeks. Actually, let's do last 10. Last 10 weeks, last 6 weeks, last 3 weeks, and last week, and then current week. So I kind of like, depending on what I'm looking at, I either kind of want to look at a monthly or weekly view, sometimes a mix, which you can do. Once you kind of have these metrics, it's really easy to do it. But, like, let's say we wanted to compare revenue based on these trends. So, or any KPI for that matter, because once we kind of build this, we can kind of add things to it. But for the sake of this, let's just look at our revenue. So, I like this kind of view, because as we're looking at a business, if I'm looking at the last 12-month average, or the last 12-month average revenue per month, it makes sense. Like, okay, here's how we averaged over the last 12 months. And let me put this, because these are all averages, just to be clear. So as I look over the average of the last 12 months versus like last month, if last month was higher than our last 12-month average, then, we're trending well. And, hopefully what I'd like to see is that, the last 12-month average is lower. And, as we go up each one of these kind of rungs, it gets higher, because that means that we're showing continual growth. So one of the things I really like to look at, and then I use those kind of metrics to gauge current month, to say, okay, if my current month, like basically I use these as like a goal to say, okay, I want my current month to beat these, or, where does it line up based on our last metrics? The problem is, normally I think we would initially go to a case statement to kind of group these, right? So we could say something along the line. So let's just actually do this. So if we wanted to take the sum of revenue from payment, not revenue, amount, which I'm not quite sure why they call that, but all right. So the sum of amount from payment, so we have it here, but really what we want to do is we want to bucket it by these things. So normally I think like what the original thing to do is we say, okay, and sorry, I'm going to check and see like what our date is. Select the max payment date from payment. So we got to pretend it's a certain day. So we're going to pretend that today is November. Let me see how much revenue there is where payment date is less than or equal to, and let's just say 2005, 12, 20, right before Christmas. We're all interested in the books. Let's see. As revenue. Oh, let's get rid of this. All right, so we do have quite a bit of revenue there. So like if we wanted to kind of, we can use a case statement to say case when payment date is, and this is where we would kind of start breaking things out. So like, let's say we wanted it to say, in the last, let's say the last month, right? Where payment date is greater than or equal to, and this is where we kind of got to fake it. Normally we would use the current date function to kind of get this, but we're going to say date sub, and this is where we would use current date, but we're going to fake it because we're going to pretend that today is 12/20 of 2005, which is mind blowing. That was 16 years ago. We're going to interval, and we're subtracting 1 month. So basically what we're saying is we're going to say, hey, look, if the payment date is greater than or equal to 1 month ago from, I'm just going to say today, but just know that that's this date. If it's 1 month ago from today, if it's greater than or equal to that, then we're going to count it, meaning that it's, between that month and today. Because we have this filter in here to simulate that payments would stop on today. But normally payments aren't really like future dated. So that would work. So then we would say something like, last 1 month. And we can kind of continue this trend. And I already know that it's kind of broken, so I'm not going to get too far, but let's say let's just start with this for now. And then I'm going to say else not accounted for. So we'll just say not applicable and as month segment. So let's go ahead and we need to add a group by.
Could you explain real quick what the case statement is? That's new to me.
And I am sorry, I thought, have we not covered case statements yet? So week 5, week 6. Oh, we have not covered case statements. Sorry, I thought for sure we don't hit those till 10, but I got them confused with something else. So basically what the case statement does is it's like conditional logic. So for example, if I had, let's just do a real easy one so we can kind of see. So I'm going to say case when 1 + 1 is equal to 2, then we know math. Else we don't. We can kind of select this, and let me give this a name so it's not weird. We can run conditional logic to kind of say this. So let's add another when clause. We can say when, 1 + 1 is equal to 3. So basically it's going to check this. So basically, like, I'm kind of faking this, but imagine like if we're checking the payment date, it's going to go through and check, and it says, okay, in order, right? Which is kind of the catch to this. So in order, if the payment date meets this condition, so is the payment date greater than or equal to today, then it returns this. Now it can only be one of these, right? Because it can only return a single value. So as soon as it matches one of these, it kind of breaks out of it. It's like an if statement if you've known any other languages. So basically it's just like a conditional, like if this, then this. It's kind of like a way to translate it. So actually let's use another example, one that's a little bit better. So let's say case when 1 then, well, yeah, so let's do this. We're going to say select 1 union, select 2, and we're going to make this, so just to bring this full circle, we're going to make our little subquery here. It's going to just basically select a 1 and a 2. What's going on? What's complaining about that? Okay. So there's our 1 and our 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically translate this. So I'm going to select everything from this. We're going to call it binary. We'll just call it bin. So there's our bin, and let's call it bin val. So there's our bin val, and let's translate this into a yes or a no. So basically what we can do is we can use like case statement logic to say when bin val is equal to 1, then yes. When bin val is equal to 2, then no. And as yes, no, and then let's do one more. So we're going to say case when bin val is equal to 1, then true. When bin val is equal to 2, then false. And really I should have used 0, but you know. So now we have this nice little kind of table that has, you know, all of like the different combinations of stuff. But that's basically how the case statement works is it basically goes to say like, oh, if conditional logic, if the bin val is equal to 1, then it's going to do yes. If the bin val is equal to 2, then yn is going to be no. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and apologies. I thought for some reason I thought we had already covered those. But they're not going to be too like we're going to do away with this case statement as soon as we prove that it doesn't work. So like I said, though, because it evaluates these in order, because the important part of this is we want to make sure I don't want, for example, looking back up to our little cadence here, I want the last 12 months to be inclusive of the last 6 months, the last 3 months, and the last month. You know, I want it to be all encompassing because otherwise it would really just be, you know, 6 month period, even, which is very misleading. And so even looking at this one where we have our last month and our last 3 months, I want the last month to be included in the last 3 months. But because it's handled in order of operations, you know, it can only be one. So a single record can't be in the last 1 month and in the last 3 months. It can only be in one or the other with a case statement. And just to kind of show you that, we can kind of run this and let's see what we have here. Interval 1 month. Like that this isn't actually a date. There we go. doesn't like something there. But anyways, long story short is it doesn't work to kind of get the results we want. So we're going to queue our fun little subqueries. So a couple different ways we can go about this. One is we can actually write our case statements inside of some functions, kind of like we were doing here, where we can kind of, build it out. Or what we can do is we can write individual tables to kind of do it. So I'm going to kind of go that route since we're not really doing since we don't know case statements yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write a query to kind of pull each one of these things. So I'm going to start with the last 12 months and work up. We won't worry about weeks right now because those can get convoluted anyways. So anyways, let's select the sum of revenue amount, as revenue from payment, where the payment date is greater than or equal to, and in this case, we want to say date sub, and we are going to use our little fake today date, which is 2005-12/20. We're going to use an interval of 12 months. Now we are going to figure out what this doesn't like. So that date sub function here, make sure we got things thinking how we want. I'm just missing the comma. It wants a comma. There we go. So there's our last 12 months of revenue. But what we want is we actually want an average monthly, if that makes sense, which is a little bit funny. So again, what we're going to do is we are going to basically get our average monthly, which we might have to do a little bit more there. So, because if we just change this to an average, what it's going to give us is an average of each individual payment. So our average is $4, which we know isn't right. So what we want to do is we want to pull the month of payment date, and we will call this we'll just do like that. So there's our month. Now we need to group by the month. And now we have our average for each one of the months. So this is actually a good subquery, right? We have our total here of all of our months with the average. Let's see. No, this still isn't right. We want, the sum of amount by our revenue. So now we have our month with the total revenue and for the last 12 months. So now at this point, we're going to start kind of building our main query. So we're going to select the average. Oh, and one more thing we're missing is we want to give this kind of a name because we want this to be in a segment. So I'm going to call this last 12 months as, let's call it time segment, period segment, I think is what we called it, period segment. And we would need to go. So let's back that off. Just make sure we're good here. All right, so now we have our period is last 12 months, our actual month number, and our revenue for those months. So now, like I said, we're going to start building kind of our outer query where we're going to basically like to answer some of the questions about like, how do we go about doing it? What, especially with subqueries, I try to think, okay, what's the base I need to get to, or like little piece that I need to get to. And so in this case, it's like, well, I need to, build each one of these kind of segments. and then kind of like pull them together. So to kind of start pulling this together, I would say I want to select the period segment and the average revenue. And I select it from this. So here's this one. And we need to give it an alias, which is, let's call it average monthly. Let's call it AM. And we need to group by our period segment. All right, so now you can see we're kind of starting to get to where we want to be. So we have our period segment, we have our average revenue, which we now know is monthly. So let's actually rename this as average monthly revenue. So there's our average monthly revenue for that time period. So now what we're going to do is we're going to leverage our knowledge of sets, and we are going to union all, and we're going to repeat this process a lot for each one of these things. Because basically what we're going to end up with is a list of all of our kind of periods with our data inside. So we're going to just change these two values, and then we can run this. And now we have the last 12 months, the last 6 months, and so on and so forth down the line here. Ooh, last 3 months aren't looking good. Aren't looking good at all. But to kind of show you what this is doing is we're bringing our list of totals in here. So here's all of our months in the period. And you'll notice that some of these months are in both like we wanted. So for example, month 6 is in the last 6 months and the last 12 months, which is perfect. Same with 2. 2 is in the last 3 months, the last 6 months, and the last 12 months, which is perfect. Like that's exactly what we wanted, right? Because we want to make sure that all these are kind of adding up to the right number, which is great. And then what we're doing is once we kind of have that list built, then we're taking from that the period segment, which is kind of how we want to see it sliced by the dimension. And we want the average revenue for each one of those segments. And because we're already getting the average revenue by month in our list, this becomes the average monthly revenue. Does that make sense to everybody? Silence is not reaffirming me. Do I need to back off to something simpler?
It makes sense to me.
Okay, perfect. And I will back this off to something a little bit simpler, but to me, like this kind of always helped me kind of see a time where, you know, we need it, because just by doing with joins, even it basically, this is actually the simplest way to kind of go about doing this. And the nice thing is it's really, really modular. We can just add things very quickly to our underneath list to kind of build up to our main list. So it looks like actually,
are there a lot of statements that you like, standardized ones that you just kind of use a lot, adjust it a little bit here or there? You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, yeah, and it, like, you know, and it'll change from database to database. Like, so there's not really one that will just like work across the board, but like, especially if you're working like with the same system, the same database, especially for me, like, cause I mostly deal with reporting. For me, I very much do come up with like standard queries, and we'll get to this in just a second, but even when like we're building your test data, you'll find that, especially because I remember kind of like seeing like the CRUD statements, right? Or, another good, like, the CRUD statements. I think a lot of students might look at that and be like, well, this is kind of dumb. Like, I don't need to write like a read statement for every table and yada, yada, especially if it's like, oh, I'm not going to use this unless I'm joining and all that. But the method to the madness is that once you kind of get there, a lot of the work is almost already done for you in a way. And so like, yeah, like a good example would be a really standard query is something like, if I just want to see, last X month's revenue, it's really easy to kind of like keep this and reuse it. And like you just saw, we can just, build a list out of it. So like, if we want to see like, oh, what's the average monthly across, all these different things, super easy to do, where we can kind of give it a name. And then just really quickly just kind of specify how many months. Cause normally like we would just do something like this where we say, cur date, where basically, okay, from today, 1 month ago, how much revenue did we have basically from 1 month ago to today in the last month, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, there's lots of ways you can kind of template queries to use them over and over and over again. And what you'll find, because like you guys kind of said, it's hard to kind of read like it's hard to take the problem and solve it with the SQL. And that's something that just honestly takes a little bit of experience. So, hopefully you get a little bit of that through the exercises. And if you have time and you're super interested, hopefully you maybe take a little bit farther to do stuff like this. So like, this was actually the prompt I was going to kind of come up with a little bit of help. And I still will, because, maybe I'll have you guys do the weekly version, or something like that. But basically it's one of those things that honestly kind of just takes like experience, and working through it, because like I've worked through these problems many times. So, I can kind of like go with it. But, you guys learning as students, it's not going to be that clear. And so you kind of have to think about it. And so the way that I like to do it is I always like to kind of start with, okay, what data do I need to build this? And let's actually walk through that, because I think that's a good question. So if we were going to go back and kind of, now that we've kind of seen a solution, if we were like, kind of the way I like to start with this is, okay, I need average monthly revenue. So what do I need to see? Well, I need to see a month and the revenue, because I can't get the average monthly revenue across spanning multiple months until I have this view, right? Because I need the revenue segmented by the month. So then that way, when I say, okay, so for March, April, May, what was the average for each distinct month across all three? And so, I kind of like to say, okay, what's the root data set? Because, a lot of us like to think in, especially when we're writing these reports, right? And I like to think of it like a business sense. So a lot of people, especially if you're working in reporting, a lot of people come and they'll explain what they want to see. And even us, like if you're trying to do some analytics, what the end result you want to be able to kind of see the vision, or, create this graph or see this table, what the result that you want it to be is. And so, but really what you got to do is kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, what data is going to drive this? And sometimes that's layered, which gets hard. That's the hard part about subqueries, is it then becomes a 7-layer dip of, okay, which is very powerful, because like in this case, we actually have 2 layers here. We have our underneath layer, which, like I said, built this view, but then we have the layer on top, which actually condenses that data and then gives us the report view. So we have our raw data, we have our monthly aggregation, and then we have our period aggregation. So we have 3 layers of data going on there. So if it is difficult, like, don't be flustered by that, because it is inherently difficult to go from, here's the problem, I know what the solution end result needs to be, but how do I go about building it? And honestly, like, that's something that's going to take a little bit of time. But the advice that I have is to say, okay, let me start from the ground up, right? Instead of thinking what I want this report to be, necessarily, let's think about what I need to do to get there. So like I said, from our root data, I need to take our month and get the total number of revenue for each month. Then from there, I can then condense get the average of the month's revenue to span the segment. And we'll call this one monthly revenue. So we kind of like go from this, and then we kind of condense it or aggregate it down. And that's kind of like what aggregation is all about, because we're performing aggregation here, and then we're performing aggregation here. And the reason why we have to use the subquery is because you can't perform aggregations within aggregations. So I couldn't do something like this. I couldn't say, average the sum like that. It just doesn't work, because we need 2 different group bys, right? We first want, the inner needs to group by the month, but the outer needs to group by the segment, and it just doesn't know how to do that. So that's why we come up with subquery. So it's kind of like you got to build the layers as you go up. And this one was a complex one, which is why right now we're going to back off just a little bit, because I kind of want to go through, and I've kind of shown you this before. But now that we know about subqueries, I want to kind of back this off so we kind of see some more simple examples. So if I wanted to insert some data and kind of fill my tables, because they're all connected, we don't always want to hard code an ID. I mean, we could, but it becomes a pain, right? To constantly try to go and look up things and all that. So what I'm going to do is kind of an example is, let's take a look at our city table in Sequila. So let's select everything from city and take a look here. And just for kicks and giggles, I want to see if like Salt Lake City is in here, or city is like, let's put that in there, see if we can find anything. So Salt Lake doesn't exist as a city in our database yet. So let's say I want to insert that. And we know we have this country ID here. And I could go look like this, where I say, select everything from country, and I could go find it, or I could write this query to say, where country is equal to United States. And there it is. And then I could, use my 103, which I would then say, insert into city. Sorry, I got to look again to make sure I get all these things in here. City ID, which we're not going to use. We're just going to insert the city, country ID. Put our values in here. Salt Lake City. And, then our country ID, which was 103. And we could do it like that. So, insert it just like that. It worked. And now we'll have it. But the easiest way, because we have to write this query already to go and pull this 103, we want to make sure we have that. And, the hard part, especially as you're developing, all it takes is for one thing to get copied before, like, one insert to happen before, and all of a sudden 103 might be the country of Turkey, which, isn't accurate. So we try to avoid this because especially as we're building, we might not know that 103 is the United States for certain. But what we can do is we can let the computer find it for us each time, just like we did. That's one thing I love about SQL is it's very much how we work as humans. So instead of selecting everything, we're just going to select a country ID from country, and now we'll have it. So I'm actually going to real quick, let's delete from city, where city equal to Salt Lake City. All right, so now it's gone. And we're going to try this way with our subquery. Again, I'm going to just kind of format this a little bit for my sanity here. And on inserts, sometimes I like to just do it like this. Oops. I don't think I can add a space there, so we'll just tab it in. There we go. So basically the same thing, same result. We just let the computer do the work for us because it'll pull whatever the country ID is every time. So as you're inserting data for every foreign key, rather than try to, link instead of like hard coding things, and feel free to hard code if you've already done it. But if you haven't started yet, it's a lot easier to kind of go this route because, like I said, you have to write your CRUD statements anyways. So I would just use something like this. So whether it's an email or, something like that. So for example, on my users, I write my CRUD statement as, select. I always write like one of my example CRUD statements is, what's the easiest way for me to get to the ID? So like, for example, the system user, the easiest way for me to get a single ID is with the email, and so on. And sometimes you have to use multiple kind of things, but it becomes easier. So you can kind of see where I've done this. And we already have a video where I've done this, but hopefully now that we've learned subqueries, it's starting to make a little bit more sense to where, instead of trying to find out, which one was this, I can just say, find the family where the name, because us as humans, we'll remember the name of the family, but we won't necessarily remember, other things. So I like to use subqueries for that reason. Does that make sense to everybody, or do you guys want to see some more examples as far as this goes?
That's helpful. I think the hard part is interpreting the exercises, the language they use when they're describing what they're looking for is complicated.
Okay, let's real quick kind of go through some of those then and just make sure they make sense. So we made it up to 3. So let's take a look at 4. So rewrite the following query with 2 subqueries into multi-column subquery. The subquery should use a filtered cross join between the film and actor table. Okay, so let's take a look at this. The foregoing query returns the following result set, and so should the new query. So basically, we're looking to kind of edit this into a new one. So let's go over here. We'll just keep kind of adding to our list here. All right. So right now, what this is doing is it's pulling the actor and the film where the actor last name is equal to Monroe and is in PG film. So basically all the Monroe actors that have been in the PG movie. So that's going to show all the actors in all the films. So we need to rewrite it, and we need to change the 2 subqueries into a multi-column subquery. And then we're going to cross join. The subquery needs to be a cross join with a filter. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take these two subqueries. So I'm just going to take and copy these out here. And we're going to cross join those. With two subqueries into a multi-column subquery. So basically, yeah, we want to take these two and cross join them, because right now we have one for the film and one for the actor table. And basically what it's asking us to do is to combine this into one. So we're going to say select actor ID and film ID all in the same thing. Because again, like I said, because of the way we're doing where and really all we're doing is we're saying we want the actor's last name to be Monroe and the film to be equal to PG. So kind of like what we did in the previous example with where we were matching the level of the actor up, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to start with actor. So we're going to say from actor A, and we're going to cross join this to get every possible combination with film, which isn't accurate. You know, not every actor was in every film, but in this case, we only want the list of all the Monroe and all the PG films. So whether she was in them or not, we don't necessarily care, because the outer query is going to pull this all together for us, if that makes sense. So we're going to filter this down. So we're going to say where A dot last name is equal to Monroe, and we better put our F, we need to use our aliases here, and F dot rating is equal to PG. So if we were to do this, granted that we don't have any mistakes in here. Oh, and it's because we just need to delete these since we didn't use them. There we go. So now we have a list basically of all of our actors in all of our films where the last name is equal to Monroe and the rating is equal to PG. And it's a little bit weird way of getting it, but basically we're just combining these two into like a single data set, so to speak. So I'm going to take and copy this. And basically what we're going to do is we are going to take this and use it as a subquery. And it doesn't really say how to go about using it as a subquery. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to join it. Oh, we could join it, or we could say, because we're selecting actor and film, we will do it like that. Let's see. I've actually, nope, that's not what we're looking for. So instead of doing this where clause, what we're going to do is we're going to join it. And we're going to say, inner join this. We're going to call this MP for Monroe PG-13. Go wrong here. A dot. And there we go. So basically what we're doing is we're taking kind of the existing set, we're going to interjoin it. And because film actor is an actor that's in a film, it's kind of already like that single record is an actor within a film. And because we did a cross join down here, we already have every possible combination of when an actor could have been in a Monroe actor could have been in a PG film. So whether she was in it or not, we have it in this one. Basically, in this one, we're pretending that Monroe is in every PG movie, if that makes sense. So basically we're pretending that she's in every PG movie. And so then when we come up here, film actor only has what movies she was in. So by doing our inner join, we're basically taking the number of movies that she was in. So film actor, this is the number of movies she was in. And this is basically all the ones that were possible. And because we're doing an inner join, we're only getting the ones in the middle. So actually we will just erase those lines because we're doing that inner join. So because we're doing that inner join, we basically are only getting the movies where Monroe was in a PG-13 movie. So this is our pretend. So because does that make sense? Does that not make sense to anyone? Okay. There's not many people left, but which is fine. But yeah, so basically we're building every possible combination and we're using that to kind of filter down the real possibilities, if that makes sense. Because in this one, every film ID that's PG and every actor whose name is Monroe will exist in their own unique columns. So then when we do our inner join, we get the results that we're looking for. But anyways, if you're still here, thanks for sticking around. Do you guys have any other things that you'd like to see? Do you guys want to see some more exercises? I think there's only one left.
I've actually finished the exercises myself, but I would love it if some more were available to practice on later.
Yep. Yeah. And I will put some of those together. Like I said, I really like my mind's always, because these ones are hard. Like even for me, like I kind of see the struggle because these ones are hard for me because while I understand like what they're doing, it just is illogical to go about it this way, if that makes sense. Because like really all we're doing is looking for movies where Monroe was in a PG-13 movie, which are far easier ways to go about it. So it's really hard for me to like kind of do this like really ski-wampus-y way to go about it so what I'll try to do is I'll try to put together some real world applicable use cases for subqueries, and hopefully that will make it make more sense or / be a little bit more fun, or at least clear.
Yeah, that would help. These last two, I found examples actually in the chapter that were really similar, and I was able to kind of infer the rules they were using in the examples and twist them to the assigned question.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, I'll put together some better examples that'll be more fun, more clear, and hopefully you get a little bit more out of them.
awesome. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for sticking around. If anything comes up in the week, just let me know.
All right.
Thank you.
All righty. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.